Now let's look at the pages in Russia. That is 1927 up to 1939. 1927 up to 1939. So the pages, it was also one of the policies by Stalin. We have looked at a number of policies. So one of it was the pages. So this one, it was the systematic, or it was a system of purifying the Russian state from any political resistance by killing all the critics. So all those who were the opponents of Stalin, they were killed. So that one, it was called the Purges. So this one, it took place from 1927 to 1939. So why did Stalin indulge himself on the Purges? The first one, the major reason was to secure his position as the Russian leader. Remember, by this time now, Stalin, he became a virtual dictator, a total dictator in Russia. So he did not want any opposition. As we know, dictators, they don't want any opposition. So he introduced the Purges, that is purifying the Russian state from all critics. Secondly, he also wanted to end any form of political opposition by enforcing law and order. So these pages, the killings, they touched every sector of the Russian society, be it the Politburo, that is the parliament, or the cabinet, the Communist Party, that is his own party, the Communist Party, and again the army, the police, the factories, university lecturers, teachers, and even ordinary people. All those, they suffered with these pages. So what he did was that he created a secret police by the name NKVD. NKVD is an abbreviation for a very long Russian name that is difficult to pronounce. So it is just shortened to NKVD. So this one, it was a secret police. So this one, it was there to deal with all the enemies of Stalin. So all those who were suspected to be in opposition, they were taken, they were arrested, and they were forced to confess in public places. They were dragged to the public places to confess that they were against the leader. Then, in those public places, they were shot dead after their confession. So millions were sent to labor camps. Remember, we mentioned of Siberia as the labor camp. So there they were working in mines, as well as they were doing the construction works. So we are talking of the critics of Stalin here. So about 139 members of the Politburo, the parliament, who were elected in 1934, more than 90 were arrested and shot dead. So you can see there, there were 139 members of the parliament. About 90 of them were arrested and most of them shot dead. So how many remained there? So really, it was pathetic there. And again, over 5,000 army officers, including the generals, 13 of 15 generals, they were all arrested. 35,000 soldiers being arrested simply because Stalin wanted to purify the Russian state through the pages. Anyone who spoke anything, just a word to show with the elements of opposition, that one was enough for you to be arrested. Then the opponents, most of the opponents in the Politburo, they were also dismissed. All those who had contrary views in the parliament, they were dismissed. So what happened therefore was that Stalin, he became, or his position became unquestionable. No one could question what Stalin wanted to do. So it means he became a visual dictator, a total dictator. So the Purges, they ended in 1939. That's when the Purges ended, the killing of people who were in opposition or the critics. So let's look at we are towards the end of this part, that is this topic. Let's look now the assessment. Let's assess Stalin's policies, beginning with the domestic policies, the local policies. So we are going to look at his achievements. What did he achieve? So despite that he was a dictator, he killed many people through the Purges, but still more as a leader, he had some other things that he achieved. So what are these? So number one, Stalin in Russia, he achieved his vision of socialism in one country. If you can remember, after the death of Lenin, we said that there was power struggle between Lenin and Trotsky. Why Lenin won the support of the people, it was that he believed that communism must be in Russia alone and not spreading to other countries. While Trotsky, he wanted communism to spread to other countries like the wildfire, to spread worldwide. So many people, they loved Stalin and his policies. So he achieved that policy to say communism should be in Russia alone. And again, Russia was changed from an agrarian country to an industrial superpower. Agrarian, remember, we said a country that is depending on agriculture, the economy based on agriculture alone. So here we see he changed Russia from an agrarian country to an industrial superpower. So that was an achievement of Stalin. And also what happened during this time of Stalin was that industrial production improved and Russia was able to feed herself. We talked about it that there was time of starvation the other time, but during this time of Stalin, he managed to improve the production until Russia was able to feed herself. And by 1938, Russia was producing more tractors and other locomotives than any other leading country in the world. So you see to it, during that time when we were talking of the collectivization, whereby the farms or small farms were collected to make one big farm or big farms. That time, Russia again embarked on the 5-year plans. They were producing many things, industrial things, heavy machinery. So we are saying in 1939, they had more tractors than any other country. That's why maybe we can confirm to say, yes, Russia was able to feed herself because now agriculture, they were using machinery. Although they were some opposition previously from the peasants who did not want to leave their small farms into the government to make big farms. So with this, Russia achieved something. And by 1939, the meat and milk production, it doubled. It doubled as the level of 1913. It was double as much. That is to say, production was just big there. And again, what happened again was that you remember we talked about the Great Depression, which started in USA and spread to other countries, and most of the European countries were affected. But we are saying here that Russia survived the effects of the Great Depression. So we see during Stalin, there were those achievements. But it was only textile industry that was affected because the Russians, they were still importing. The reason for that was that they were still using primitive techniques of making clothes. So with that, many people did not like the clothes that were made in Russia. So they were importing those things. So you can see there primitive way of doing things. Sometimes people don't like it. The world is changing now and again, so adopting new things is good because somehow it lessens the labor itself. And also on education, education was expanded such that doctors, engineers, and scientists, they were trained. So the government also embarked on training teachers, doctors, engineers, and many scientists. And what happened in 1918, just after the end of the First World War, there were about 92,000 graduates. 92,000 graduates. And by 1937, during this time of Russia, of Stalin, the number itself reached 199,000 graduates. So that's a big number. I don't know if Malawi, that number of graduates currently 200,000. I don't think so. And by 1939, Russia had the highest number of doctors in the world. Look at that. So the country that was defeated by Japan sometime and that was stricken by poverty, but still more their policies, the policies of their leaders, they worked to their favor. And they had the highest number of doctors in the world by 1939. And the industrial expansion eliminated unemployment. Remember, this was the major problem. Unemployment was the major problem after the First World War. And Russia managed to conquer that one, to eliminate that one, because they embarked on industrial expansion. And in 1931, the wages for skilled labor was triple that of unskilled labor. So skilled labor is good because you can see here the wages. Some people the wages may be added or may triple, may double, whatever. Unlike not having any skill at all. That's why maybe you see the government currently embarking on technical colleges so that people, they need to have skilled labor so that at least they improve their lives. So in 1931, that one happened in Russia, whereby they had more skilled laborers. But however, workers that time, they were restricted to change jobs. If you start your job as maybe a bricklayer, you have to be a bricklayer, no switching of jobs. And someone could also lose his job or her job being absent for more than a day. So you can see there the government was really serious. Sometimes today we make even lame excuse, a small headache, I'm not going to work, things like those. So here we see the factors that led Russia maybe to be somewhere. So they were serious on their jobs, and someone could lose the job just for to be absent for more than a day, then no more employment for you. But then there we are looking at the strength of the domestic policies by Stalin. But what were the weaknesses of his domestic policies? Firstly, the Purges. We have just talked about the Purges. Those Purges, they weakened Russia in that able people, the people who were able, strong people were removed, they were killed. The people who could reason, who could say that this is bad, those people were taken that, no, these are bad people, you cannot criticize the leader. So able people were removed, they were killed. And millions of individuals like doctors, teachers, lecturers, engineers, and others, they were shot dead or sent to forced labor in Siberia where they never returned. So you can see there, someone is a professional, a doctor, a teacher, an engineer, because he has criticized a certain element in the leader, then that one, his profession, it was the end of his profession. So most of those people who were able to develop Russia, they were sent to forced labor where they did not return. Another weakness was that there was religious persecution. So this one was really common in Russia, since the communists, they did not believe in the existence of God. As a result, They were against anyone who was showing a belief in God. Those who were professing their faith in God, those people were the enemies of communism. For example, Islam itself, it was thought to hold back industrialization, and Muslim leaders were imprisoned or deported, and mosques were closed. So Islamic religion, that one, it was taken as a religion that was holding back industrialization. So all Muslims were hated. And what happened was that the leaders, simply because most of them, they came from Arabia there, then they were deported back and mosques were closed. So that is another weakness there of the domestic policy of Stalin. And also, not only Islams were hated, but also Christians. Christians were arrested for attending churches, for going to church, because work was supposed to be done every day, 7 days a week. So people were supposed to go to work. So all those who were going to church, they were arrested. All schools offered lessons in atheism in order to abolish religion. They offered the atheism as a subject. Atheism, the belief that there is no God. There is no God. So human beings, they are to do, if they are to change the world, it is up to what they do. So they were teaching that one as a subject, not believing in any religion. So Russia was infested with the praise of Stalin. That was another weakness. Throughout Russia, everyone was supposed to praise Stalin, whether good or bad. Your uncle has just been sent to Siberia yesterday, but today you cannot talk bad of someone who has done that to your uncle, other than praising him. You just praise him, oh, our good leader, our good leader. But you know your uncle will never come back, or your parents have been taken from you where they will not come back. But still more, you are forced to praise the leader. Don't talk anything about anyone apart from Stalin, the leader. And again, what happened was that education promoted Stalinist propaganda. And history books tried to show Lenin and Stalin as heroes. So that's what happened there. Education, it was about the leader, Stalin propaganda. So remember, Lenin was regarded as a good leader, the first communist leader, and Stalin, the second one. So they were praised together as heroes of Russia. Today, if we go to Russia, we'll also find the same. Their statues are always found together in Russia there. So children were encouraged to join the Young Pioneer. The Young Pioneer. Long time ago in Malawi, we also had the Young Pioneer, which was during the MCP era, during the time of Dr. Banda. There was that Young Pioneer. So children were encouraged, young people, maybe soon after finishing their school, they were supposed to join the Young Pioneer. The streets were named after Stalin. So we are looking at the weaknesses here. Things, mainly they were on Stalin. The praise on Stalin. So streets, they were named after Stalin. This one, Stalin 1, Stalin 2 Street, Stalin 3 Street, like that. Everywhere you go in the streets, you find the name Stalin. So his statues, the statues of Stalin and the portraits, the photographs were all over the town. The statues of Stalin, the posters everywhere of Stalin. So here is a weakness because people, they were only praising Stalin as the great leader. And another weakness was that the NKVD, that secret police, it heavily censored the works of art and literature, poems, music. They were carefully written and composed to spread, to praise Stalin. So all these were on the praise of Stalin. So that was a weakness, another weakness. Again, we see that it was all the praise of Stalin. And only those plays and music that praised Stalin were allowed to be done. So Stalin, on the other hand, he grew suspicious of everyone around him. So just like any dictator, that's what is common, a common character of the dictators. They are suspicious of everyone. Disregarding that this one is the closest friend, they are suspicious of everyone. So because of that, that's why maybe we see there were the pages, because he was just suspicious of everyone, disregarding who he was. So people lived in terrible fear. So that was another weakness there, because it was only focusing on Stalin, 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 and people were living in fear. They were afraid of Stalin. So that was the domestic policy of Stalin. Now let's look at the foreign policy. So on Stalin, the foreign policy was aimed at avoiding any soon attack from the Western countries, because he had created enmity with the Western countries. And the Western countries, they did not like the spread of communism. But therefore, he tried to improve the relations. That is, Stalin, he tried to improve the relations to avoid any soon war with the West, because they hated his type of government, that is communism. So in 1924, Britain gave full diplomatic recognition of the communist government in Russia. That is to say, Britain, by 1924, they accepted to say, we will not manage to put capitalism in Russia. So they accepted Russia as a communist nation. And the Soviet relations with Germany improved until the rise of the Nazi in 1933. See, so that is another policy of Stalin. 1924, we see there was that relation with Britain, and Britain recognized the presence of Russia as a communist state. So they were in good terms. So it's good if you know your enemy and you just accept that he is just as he is, then you are going to live better. But if you try to force that one to be like you, sometimes it will not work. You'll be at conflict all the times. So here, that's what Stalin did, and the West also accepted. So it happened like that. And secondly, we are saying that the Soviet, that is Russia, also improved the relations with Germany until 1933, when Nazi came to power under Adolf Hitler. So why did it change in 1933? Because Hitler himself, he hated communism. But before that, there was a good relation between Germany and Russia. So Stalin, therefore, he improved the relations with France and Britain to avoid the conflict with Germany. So from 1933, when Hitler came to power, then Hitler hated communism. Then Stalin improved that his relations with France and Britain, so that they avoid the conflict with Germany. So with that, then in 1934, Russia was admitted into the League of Nations. Remember, we said Russia was not invited during that Versailles Treaty in 1919 in France. The reason was that there was communism in Russia. So the Western countries did not want any communist elements in their world. Rather, they wanted to suppress that communism. So it was only in 1934, after the Western countries, we have talked of Britain, after Britain accepted that yes, Russia is a communist government. So in 1934, they allowed Russia to be part of the League of Nations, to be a member. So in 1935, Russia signed the Pact of Mutual Assistance with France and Czechoslovakia. So we see there another foreign policy there to say he signed that pact of mutual assistance. So the term of agreement was that they were to assist each other in terms of war, and Russia would offer support to Czechoslovakia if France also would come in to help. Another foreign policy was that the British and the French policy of appeasement towards Germany, Italy, and Japan caused Russia to distrust their allies. So it happened that after there was that good relation with the Western countries, but Britain and France, they had that appeasement policy. We are going to look at that one very soon when we look at the rise of dictatorship in Germany. So they had that appeasement policy towards Germany. That one, Russia, it was not good for Russia. So she started to distrust the Western countries. So with that, it also happened that after Germany and Japan signed the anti-Comintern pact in 1936, Stalin then he began to fear the possibility of a true France war. To say, in 1936, Germany signed an agreement with Japan. Remember what happened in 1904-05? Japan defeated Russia. A big country was defeated by a small country. We talked about that. But here then, we see in 1936, there is an agreement between two enemies of Russia. There is Japan, which is to the far east, and there is Germany to the west. So Stalin was afraid to say there will be war. If there will be war with Germany, then Japan will be attacking me from the eastern side. So Stalin feared the possibility of two France war from Japan and Germany. So in order to stop this two-front war, then Stalin, he signed the Soviet-Nazi Pact in 1939. So immediately he recognized to say, yes, I cannot be an enemy of Germany anymore. I have to come closer to Germany. So he came closer to Germany. Russia came closer to Germany in 1939 by signing the Nazi-Soviet Pact, in 1939. So in that pact, they made some agreements. What were they? Number one, Germany and Russia, they agreed to partition Poland. They said, all right, we become friends now, so we are going to take Poland and divide it into two. Your part and my part. That is Germany and Russia. And Germany also would get West Poland and Lithuania, while Russia would get East Poland, Finland, Estonia, Latvia. These countries, remember, the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, 1917, remember when Russia was withdrawing from the war. They were at first part of Russia, but the League of Nations declared they'd become independent. But them also, they are saying, no, these countries cannot be independent. We are going to get them. So they are sharing here between Germany and Russia. They are sharing Poland, Finland, Estonia, and Latvia. They are sharing amongst themselves. And the sharing of this Poland, it was one of the causes of the Second World War. We are going to look at that very soon. And also, what happened was that on 22nd January 1941, Germany invaded Russia. So what happened there then was that Russia's relations improved with the West throughout this period. The reason was that after they divided Poland, we are going to explain that further when we'll be looking at the causes of the First World War and the outbreak, the highlights of the war. When after they did that, they shared Poland. So Russia withdrew immediately, and she made relations with the West after she saw to it that Germany would not be a trusted friend. So Stalin took an active part in the discussion that led to the formation of the United Nations. So we see to it his foreign policy, somehow they were successful, somehow again they were the failures again. And after 1945, Russia's diplomatic relations with the West, it was characterized by distrust. So after the war, the Second World War, it happened that Stalin again began to distrust the West. The West still more did not like the communism. They did not like communism, although they accepted Russia in the Western or in the League of Nations, but they did not like the type of government that was in Russia. So the Western countries, they were trying as much as possible to stop the spread of communism westwards. So that one resulted into the Cold War. Right, so let's look at the impact of communism on Russia and the world. So this is the final part on this topic, where we'll look at the impact now of communism. We have looked at communism in Russia. So what impact did it have on the world and Russia itself? So number one, Russia was transformed both politically and economically. So there was that big transformation in Russia. By the end of the Second World War, Russia had gained prominent position in the world politics as a superpower. So there were big changes there in Russia because of communism. So we're saying that those changes were there politically as well as economically. Secondly, the living standards of people in the communist countries were lower than in the Western democracies. So secondly, another impact was that the living standard of people in the communist world, communist countries, the living standard was poor or lower than in the Western countries. So much as we are saying that there was that tremendous transformation politically and economically, what happened was that Russia prospered, that is, as the government, but the average person maintained or remained to be poor because of communism. Remember, in communism, we said that everything is owned by the state, and there is no private ownership of any property. So what does it mean? The government has it all. Well, the average person there is having nothing. So people migrated from east to west in search of better jobs. People were migrating from Russia, from the communist world, going to the Western countries, the European countries, the Western countries there to look for jobs, because life there in the communist world, it was not favoring the individual but the government. And the communist government or governments were mostly dictatorships. So they had little regard for human rights. They did not regard for human rights at all. So with that, we see that because of dictatorship, people were not living freely. We have looked at that one. Another impact was that communism encouraged revolutions in other countries. So communism encouraged revolutions in other countries. We talk of Cuba. It also happened the same. There is also another element of Cuba here. We'll also look at this Cuba, what happened in Cuba sometime. And after 1945, some countries, they adopted communist governments as well because it was encouraging revolutions. So communism also encouraged nationalist movements in neutral countries. It encouraged nationalist movements. So nationalism here nationalism. We talk of nationalism, that is fighting for their own countries, fighting for independence. So we see to it, we'll study or we'll focus. There is also another topic on this one whereby we'll look at nationalism in India as well as in Kenya, Asia and Africa. So when we talk of nationalism, it did not just come just as it is. It was not just free. There were demonstrations rising now and again. So those revolutions, they had their roots from communism. So communism encouraged nationalism, nationalist movements in neutral countries. So we see to it that there was that element. Even during the Cold War, the Soviet Union supported nationalist movements, especially in African countries. We talk of our neighbor here, Mozambique. There was Frelimo and Renamo. The other part was supported by communism. We talk of Angola, the same things. They were supported by the same Russian communism. So that is the impact. It had really impact worldwide. So having reached this far, we have come to the end of this topic. That is the communist revolution in Russia. We have seen a lot of elements there, how it started from 1800s, from the period of the Tsar, how the Tsar fell, and how Lenin came over, and the policies that were there starting from the period of the Tsar. So next time, I will be proceeding with another topic, and this one is the development of autocratic government in Germany. So here it's another interesting topic where we look at a number of issues that happened in Germany. Especially we'll be talking of autocratic, which means dictatorship. Remember we talked of the Tsar, he was also using the autocratic system of leadership, ruling with the iron fist. So this time we'll look in Germany. What happened in Germany with this autocratic government? So I think it will be really another interesting topic. Thank you so much.
Simutaya nthawi yanu kufunafuna maphunziro muzakhala wotumidwa moyo wanu wonse. Ngati simuphunzira anthu azingokutumani ajala kalime ajala kuchwe manyazi ajala katende yanti ndipo anthu ophunzira wandu wotuma so kwambiri. Ndiye ngati simuphunzira skulu akuyikirani apa mukhala otumidwa.